Welcome back to Developing Materials for English Language Learning. My beautiful co-host, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, really looking forward to digging into these foundational ideas today.
Excellent. And hey, for all of you listening in, if you're finding this useful, maybe give us a like or
Yeah.
subscribe.
Yeah, it really helps us out, lets us know we're on the right track.
Absolutely. So maybe grab that coffee or your tea, settle in for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to, unpack some really key concepts in materials development.
The essentials.
Exactly. Think of it as a quick way to get to grips with the main building blocks, whether you're prepping for a meeting or just catching up on things.
Or even just curious about how it all works behind the scenes.
Right. So our mission today really is to take these definitions we've gathered, explore them a bit, maybe challenge them,
Yeah, push them a little.
and hopefully give you a really solid grounding in the core principles.
Okay, let's do it. So first up, materials development. The definition we have is the process of designing, evaluating, adapting, or producing teaching and learning resources for language education, including print, digital, or multimedia formats.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does evaluating really look like in practice? I mean, is it just about teacher feedback or more than that?
Well, based strictly on that definition,
Mm-hmm.
the process of designing, evaluating, adapting, or producing.
Mm.
It sounds like evaluating is baked right into the whole process.
Mhm.
It's not just tacked on at the end. It's listed there alongside designing and adapting.
That's a good point. So it implies it's sort of ongoing. It should inform the design, the adaptation, maybe even future production cycles.
Yeah.
It makes you think, though, about how we evaluate. Learner feedback is one thing, teacher observation another, maybe effectiveness in achieving outcomes. Lots of angles.
Definitely. Okay, moving on. Concept 2, authenticity.
Ah, yes, authenticity.
The definition refers to how closely a text or task resembles language use in real-life contexts. Authentic materials are not written for language learners, but are taken from real-world sources such as newspapers, videos, or conversations.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If authentic materials aren't for learners specifically, how do we stop them from just being, overwhelming?
Well, the definition says they're taken from real-world sources, not written for language learners. So the focus there seems to be purely on the source material's origin, not its immediate suitability.
Exactly. So the language is real, untouched, which is great for exposure,
Right.
but the processing load, vocabulary, maybe cultural nuances, it could be huge, which I guess raises questions about how learners actually process that kind of input and maybe what support they need.
Yeah, that leads nicely into the next one, actually. Concept 3, adaptation. Definition: the process of modifying existing materials to suit particular teaching contexts, learners' needs, or curriculum requirements. This can involve linguistic simplification, cultural localization, or adjusting pedagogic focus.
So what does this all mean then? When we adapt something, are we always making it better? Or, could we potentially lose something important in the process, like maybe some of that authenticity we just talked about?
Well, the definition just talks about modifying to suit particular contexts, learners' needs, or requirements. It mentions simplification, localization, adjusting focus as ways to do that. It doesn't inherently claim it's always better, just suited.
Right, suited. It's a practical adjustment, but
Yeah.
it's a balance, isn't it? You simplify too much, maybe the language becomes unnatural. You localize heavily, maybe you lose the original cultural flavor. It depends on the goal, I suppose, and maybe the technical skill of the person doing the adapting, the learner of adaptation itself, perhaps.
That's a fascinating way to put it. Okay, concept 4, task-based language teaching, TBLT.
TBLT, yeah, always relevant.
Definition: a language teaching approach that organizes instruction around real-life tasks learners must accomplish using the target language, emphasizing meaningful communication over direct grammar instruction.
What's fascinating here is how do we ensure learners are still developing accurate language skills if the focus is really on just getting the task done, meaning over form, right?
According to this definition, the emphasis is on meaningful communication and accomplishing real-life tasks over direct grammar instruction. It suggests accuracy might be secondary to task completion within the task itself.
Secondary perhaps, but not ignored, ideally. The thinking in TBLT often is that the need to communicate effectively during the task creates a sort of natural pressure for accuracy.
All right.
And then crucially, there's usually a post-task phase, where the teacher might focus on errors that came up or specific language points needed for that task. So accuracy isn't abandoned, just handled differently.
Got it. Okay, next up, number 5, Comprehensible input.
Krashen's legacy.
Indeed. Definition. Language input that is slightly above the current proficiency level of the learner, I+1, allowing for natural acquisition as learners deduce meaning from context.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, how on earth do we accurately gauge what I+1 actually is for a whole classroom full of diverse learners? That seems tricky.
The definition just says slightly above the current proficiency level. It highlights the level relative to the learner and the idea that they can deduce meaning from context. It doesn't specify how you determine that level precisely for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's the practical application that's tough. What's I+1 for one student might be I+10 for another, or maybe just I.
Right.
So it suggests teachers need a really good sense of their students' levels, and maybe materials need to offer variety or built-in support, like glossaries or visuals, to help bridge that gap.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Number 6, learner autonomy.
Ooh, a really important goal.
Definition. A learner's ability to take charge of their own learning process, including setting goals, choosing resources, and evaluating their progress independently.
This raises an important question. How can materials actively foster this? How do we design resources that actually help learners become more independent rather than just relying on the teacher or the book?
Well, the definition outlines what autonomy is: taking charge, setting goals, choosing resources, evaluating progress. So materials aiming to foster this would presumably need to include features that enable those specific actions.
Exactly. So things like offering choices of tasks, maybe sections on learning strategies, self-assessment checklists,
Could be.
tools that explicitly guide learners in setting their own goals or choosing how they want to practice something. It connects to why someone might listen to this. To gain knowledge quickly, taking charge of their own professional development.
Nice link.
Yeah.
All right, number 7, form-focused instruction. Definition. An approach to language teaching that highlights specific linguistic forms, example, grammar or pronunciation, within meaningful communicative contexts.
Okay, so how do we balance this focus on form with the need for meaningful communication that we just talked about in TBLT? Aren't they kind of pulling in opposite directions sometimes?
The definition itself gives a clue. It says highlighting forms within meaningful communicative contexts. It's not presented as separate from communication, but embedded within it.
Right, so it's not about doing isolated grammar drills necessarily. It's more about, say, noticing a particular structure while you're reading an interesting text, or the teacher drawing attention to a pronunciation point that came up during a discussion.
Yeah.
So the context provides the meaning, and the focus provides the attention to accuracy. It's trying to get the best of both worlds, I guess.
Okay, number 8, scaffolding.
Very Vygotskian.
Definition. Pedagogical support provided by teachers or materials to help learners perform tasks just beyond their current ability, gradually removed as learners become more competent.
What's fascinating here is, what are some concrete examples of scaffolding we might actually see in language learning materials? Like, what does that look like on the page or screen?
Well, the definition talks about pedagogical support to help learners do something just beyond their current ability, which is then gradually removed. So examples would be things that provide temporary help for a specific task.
Exactly. So maybe things like sentence starters for a writing task.
Could be.
Or a glossary for a difficult reading passage. Maybe a planning worksheet before a speaking task.
Oh, or even like visual aids, diagrams.
Right. Anything that helps bridge that gap between what they can do alone and what they can do with a bit of help, knowing that help won't be there forever.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Number 9, corpus-informed materials.
Ooh, getting technical now.
A little.
Yeah.
Definition. Learning resources developed using data from language corpora, large structured collections of real language use, often emphasizing frequent vocabulary, collocations, or grammar patterns.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, how does using this kind of real language data actually change the way we think about what's important to teach? Does it shift our priorities?
The definition emphasizes using data from language corpora, these big collections of real language, to focus on things like frequent vocabulary, collocations, or grammar patterns. So it suggests the priorities are driven by what the data shows is common in actual use.
Precisely. Instead of relying only on intuition or older textbooks about what language is important, we can look at the data and say, okay, this particular phrasal verb or this collocation, it appears thousands of times. Learners really need this.
Right.
It helps prioritize the most frequent and arguably most useful bits of language based on actual evidence. It's quite powerful.
Definitely sounds it. Okay, number 10, Noticing.
Schmidt's noticing hypothesis territory.
Exactly. Definition. A cognitive process by which learners become aware of specific features of input, e.g. a grammatical structure, often facilitated through pedagogic interventions like underlining or comparison tasks.
This raises an important question. How can materials be designed to effectively encourage noticing? We can't force someone to notice something, can we? So how do materials help?
Well, the definition says it's a cognitive process, but that it's often facilitated through pedagogic interventions. It gives examples like underlining or comparison tasks, so the materials would need to contain those kinds of interventions.
Right. So tasks that deliberately draw attention to something, maybe highlighting the target form in a text, or asking learners to find all the examples of, say, the past perfect in a story, or comparing two sentences, one correct, one incorrect, and asking what the difference is.
Those sound like noticing tasks.
Yeah, anything that pushes the learner to consciously register a specific feature of the language they might otherwise just ignore. It's about making the input more salient.
Gotcha. Number 11, affordance.
Ah, an interesting one from ecological psychology.
It is. Definition. A concept from ecological psychology adapted in language education to describe the potential that a learning environment, task, or resource offers to a learner for action or interaction. For example, an authentic video affords exposure to natural pronunciation and intonation patterns.
Okay, let's unpack this. Can you give another example to really solidify what affordance means in a materials development context? The video example is good, but maybe one more.
Sure. Well, the definition talks about the potential that something offers for action or interaction.
Yeah.
So following the video example, which offers exposure, another example based on that definition could be maybe a role-play task. It offers the potential for practicing specific conversational strategies.
Okay, yeah, that works. Or like a collaborative writing tool online. It affords the learners the chance to negotiate meaning and co-construct text in a way that maybe just writing alone wouldn't.
Right.
So it's about the opportunities for language learning action that the resource or the task makes possible. What does it allow the learner to do?
That clarifies it nicely. Okay, final one for this section, number 12. Communicative competence.
The big goal.
It often is.
Here.
Definition. A broad understanding of language proficiency that includes grammatical accuracy, sociolinguistic appropriateness, discourse coherence, and strategic use of language in communication.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. How do materials even begin to address all these different facets? Grammatical accuracy? Yeah, okay. But sociolinguistic appropriateness, discourse coherence, strategic use, that's a lot to cover.
Well, the definition lists those four components.
Yeah.
Grammatical, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic. So materials aiming for communicative competence would presumably need activities that target each of those aspects, not just grammar.
Exactly. So you'd need more than just fill-in-the-blank exercises. You'd need tasks that require learners to understand politeness, maybe, sociolinguistic, or structure a longer piece of writing or speech coherently.
Discourse.
Or use communication strategies like asking for clarification or paraphrasing when they get stuck. Yeah. It means materials need to be really varied and push learners to use language in complex, socially aware ways, not just accurately. It's a tall order.
It definitely sounds like it covers a lot of ground. Okay, woo. That's the first 12. Now, just help us all lock these in. Let's quickly recap them. We'll just read out the terms.
Good idea. A quick run through. You start.
1. Materials development.
2, 3.
Adaptation.
4. Task-based language teaching, TBLT.
5. Comprehensible input.
6. Learner autonomy.
7. Form-focused instruction.
Scaffolding. 9. Corpus-informed materials.
10. Noticing 12.
Communicative competence.
There we go. 12 key ideas.
Absolutely. Now, for you, our wonderful listener, we'd actually love it if you'd head down to the comments section.
Yeah.
Maybe share your own understanding or even just a quick definition of some or all of these concepts.
Oh, that's a great idea. See how your definitions line up or what nuances you focus on.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way to sort of deepen your own learning and see what others think too. We'd genuinely be really interested to read your perspectives, see how these ideas connect with your experience.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into these foundational concepts of materials development.
Yeah, it's been great unpacking these.
We really hope it's given you a solid base, maybe spark some new thoughts.
And until our next discussion, thank you very much for listening.
Goodbye, and thank you.